Perfect. Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started here.
Okay. And hopefully if I've done this right, everyone should just be seeing the slides and not
Yep.
the present of your notes. Okay, that's what I was trying to get right.
Looks
All right.
perfect.
Thank you for bearing with me, everyone. All right. Hi. Thank you for coming this evening. I hope this will be a fun talk. So my name is Rebecca Heisman, and I live in Washington State, actually. I'm a freelance science writer. I write mostly about birds and bird conservation and ornithology, and I'm actually the author of a book that came out a couple years ago now, 3 years ago, wow, called Flight Paths, which is about the history of bird migration research, but that's not what I'm here to talk about this evening. I had actually given that talk for St. Paul Bird Alliance previously, and they asked me if I could come back and give another talk. Did I have another talk prepared? And the answer is yes. I had one other talk that I had ready to go that I could give. A year ago, I was asked to be a guest at the Morro Bay Bird Festival in California, and they asked me to give a second talk. And so what I came up with was this, which is basically, I have to admit, just all of my favorite weird facts about bird biology strung into a PowerPoint, but hopefully it'll be pretty fun. We're going to explore some really cool aspects of bird biology and their adaptations for their extreme lifestyles. And unless you're a professional biologist, you might not have heard of all of these before. So I've found that even people who are pretty avid birders often don't know some of these weird details about bird anatomy and stuff. So that's what we're going to dig into tonight. So, a little bit more about me. I kind of touched on this already. I am a full-time freelance science writer. I also am an environmental educator and do some of that. And I am also a birder, and I spend a ton of time reading about and thinking about and researching and interviewing people about bird science. I was actually just on the phone with an ornithologist earlier today talking about pine siskin eruptions. And so usually I'm asked to give my talk about my book, which is what's in the center here, but I also do a lot of writing for other magazines, which I've put in around the edges. And so this talk is really just my attempt to do something fun with all of the random bird biology facts that have amassed in my brain over the years and that always seem to sort of surprise other birders when I can't resist anymore and they sort of come bursting out of me going, "Did you know?" So hopefully it'll be fun. I've only given this talk once before, and that was in person, so giving it over Zoom will be a little bit of an experiment, but we did figure out how to get the sound thing working, so hopefully it will be good. So basically how this is going to work is we're going to do a whirlwind overview of four different aspects of bird biology. We're going to talk about how birds breathe, how they fly, how they sing, and how they sense the world around them. And my hope is that by the end of the talk, you will have learned several cool new things that you'll want to tell your favorite birding companions about. I think even if you know some of the things in this talk, hopefully there will at least be one cool bird fact that is new to you for the evening. So before I dive into that, people can put stuff in the chat, right? Participants in the webinar, yeah. Okay, so when I did this in person, I had people, shout out answers and stuff. But go ahead and take a second to put in the chat if you feel like making this participatory. What is a bird? What are some of the characteristics that make a bird a bird? And I'll give it a second, see if any answers pop up. Like, what are some of the uniting characteristics that we would use to define birds as a group of animals?
And we have things coming through the Q&A since it's a webinar. So,
Oh, okay.
mhm.
I see. I was looking at the chat. All right, maybe I need to figure out how to pull up the Q&A. Q&A. Aha, there we go. Dinosaur, says one person. Oh, someone is getting echoes. Are other people getting weird echoes?
I'm okay for now, but we'll see
Okay,
if
I just looked at the
anybody
Q&A
else.
and that was the first thing in
Yeah.
there. Okay, dinosaur. Yes, we'll get to that. Lovely creatures who fly. Wings, feathers, feathers, fly. Yes, okay. So you guys are on the right track. Birds have feathers. I've got that on here. They are warm-blooded, so they generate their own body heat. They lay eggs with hard shells. That's actually a common characteristic of all birds. They are vertebrates, of course, so that's one they have in common with us. They have backbones and they have wings. So when biologists talk about birds and they want to define birds as a group, these are some of the characteristics that they turn to. Now, there are exceptions to every rule. There is actually one known bird in the history of birds that did not have any wings, was not only flightless, it actually did not have any wing bones or anything at all. And these were the moas of New Zealand. This is a moa with a person for scale. So these were these enormous, enormous flightless birds that lived in New Zealand and are extinct now. But I was fascinated to learn that moas were not only flightless, they did not have wings at all, not even any little vestigial wing bones in there. They were just completely wingless, kind of like a giant Muppety thing with legs and feathers and nothing else. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting tidbit. And at least one person put in the Q&A there, dinosaurs. So yes, birds are actually nestled inside the reptile family tree. So hopefully you can see this pretty well. Birds are theropods, which means they are one of the meat-eating dinosaurs, which is a branch of the dinosaur family tree, which in turn is a branch off of the rest of the reptile family tree. So birds technically are dinosaurs. When we say that, we mean that they're part of this family tree here, but they are also reptiles. So some people would argue that ornithology maybe should just be subsumed within herpetology. And I have to apologize because there is a little bit of salty language in this, but I had to share it anyway. This is from the webcomic XKCD. And so on the left at the ornithology conference, you can see the ornithologist saying, as you can see, herpetology is a silly field. Reptiles are actually more closely related to birds and mammals than to amphibians. It should really be broken up, with lizards becoming part of ornithology. And then you can see the herpetologist's response at the herpetology conference. Anyway, today there are about 10,000 species of birds worldwide, and about two-thirds of out of all of those 10,000 are passerines, which are the perching bird or the songbird group. So that is the most numerous group of birds that we've got. Now I want to dive into the first major topic that I'm going to cover in this talk, which is how birds breathe. All right, are you guys ready for another trivia question? How many breaths does a hummingbird take each minute? You can go ahead and once again stick that in the Q&A and I'll pull that up and see what we've got. So, guesses. How many breaths do you think a hummingbird takes each minute? Many. That is a good one. 30. 30, 200, 120. Okay, so that's a pretty big range. Maybe 30, maybe 200. All right, so the answer is 250 or more, depending on their activity level. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual anatomy of bird breath because this is just mind-blowing to me. It's fascinating. Bird lungs do not work anything like mammal lungs. They are a completely different setup, and a lot of bird people, like birders, don't seem to be aware of this. So if you already are, forgive me, but if you're not, let me take you on a little ride here because this is wild. So bird lungs are rigid. They do not expand and contract like our lungs. They don't inflate and deflate. Instead, air gets pumped through them by this series of air sacs like a bellows. So you can see a sort of large blue shape in the middle is the lungs, and then it's surrounded by the air sacs, which are the parts that expand and contract to move the air through the lungs. And it gets weirder. So when birds inhale, when they first bring air in from the outside, the air, when they inhale, comes from the outside world into their very back set of air sacs, as you can see here. When they exhale next, this air does not yet go out of their body. Its journey is only beginning. So when they exhale, this air then gets moved into their lungs. Next time they inhale, this same air is getting moved from their lungs into the front set of air sacs. And then it's the next time that they exhale that it goes out of their body. So the air, as it passes through the bird's body, is going in a one-way loop, and it takes two inhale-exhale cycles to make its way all the way around this loop. So it's a totally different setup than what we have. And of course, the inhale part and the exhale part are both happening each time the bird inhales and exhales. So when the bird breathes in, we've got air coming from the outside to the back set of air sacs, and then we've got air going from the lungs to the front set of air sacs. And then when the bird exhales, we've got air going from the back air sacs into the lungs and from the front air sacs out of the body. Now, why do this? Why do birds have this setup for their respiration that's completely different from mammal respiration? The answer is that it allows for way more efficient oxygen exchange. They can get fresh oxygen into the blood and carbon dioxide out of the blood much more efficiently than we can by having this one direction system because it allows for countercurrent gas exchange where you have fresh oxygenated blood or fresh oxygenated air flowing in one direction, oxygen depleted blood flowing alongside it in the other direction. And this is important because, of course, birds fly, which takes a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount of oxygen. And so they have to get that oxygen into their blood as quickly as possible. And so that's why they have evolved this system of air sacs that move air through their body in a loop. The idea of just a one-way loop for breathing is just so hard to picture for us mammals, I feel like. And it actually gets even weirder. So this is a figure from a cool study that came out, I guess, a couple years ago now, where they were doing these CT scans of birds and they discovered a special air sac that they didn't know was there before that sits between the bird's flight muscles in the chest, air sacs like the ones we were just talking about. And this special extra air sac is only found in bird species that tend to spend a lot of time soaring. And so the researchers that found this thing did a lot of modeling trying to determine what it might do and figured out that inflating this air sac actually helps birds keep their wings in the fixed horizontal position necessary for soaring. So they're basically like blowing up a balloon in their chest to prop up their wings so that they can keep them in this soaring position for long periods of time. So really weird. And this provides us with a nice little transition into flight, which is the second thing that I was going to talk about. All right, so our next audience participation question. Who can name the four separate animal lineages that have independently evolved powered flight over the history of life? And I will pull up my Q&A again. So four separate groups of animals have evolved the ability to fly. Debbie Brown says bats. That is one of them. Yes, mammals. Humans. I'm not counting humans. Fly without machines. Insects, yes. Okay, so we've got bats, insects, birds, and the last one is extinct. That one weird fish species. Pterosaurs. There we go. And someone added maybe flying squirrels. Flying squirrels technically don't have powered flight. They glide. So yes, four different groups of animals have separately evolved the ability to do powered flight, and they are insects, birds, bats, and pterosaurs, pterodactyls, which are, of course, technically not dinosaurs, even though birds are dinosaurs. So, quick review of the physics of flight. A bird or a plane has to overcome weight and drag with thrust and lift. This requires a lot of power. If you're doing it with wings that you have to pump, it requires a lot of oxygen, hence that countercurrent gas exchange mechanism. So this, I'm sure a lot of you, probably all of you already know. The flight surface of the wing of a bird is, of course, created with these long, specialized feathers, which we have called the primaries and the secondaries. And they have this system of barbs, barbules, and hooklets on each feather that kind of zip up together to create a really smooth surface for the wings that they can fly without creating a lot of turbulence. And the other wing adaptation that adaptation for flight that you're probably familiar with is that you've probably heard that birds have hollow bones, which makes them lighter. Now, it's true that bird bones are often filled with air pockets, as you can see here, but when I actually dug into this in preparation for when I first gave this talk, I found a lot of conflicting information on there on whether this actually makes birds lighter overall and whether this matters for flight. These air pockets in the bones are apparently interconnected with the air sacs that we already talked about. So it's possible that instead of being there to make birds lighter, these air pockets in the bones might actually be involved with respiration in some way. We don't really know. So you probably knew about the hollow bones and everything already. What you might be less familiar with is the muscles that power flight. And this is where it starts getting really weird and cool. The first feature that I wanted to talk about related to this is the keel. So this is the bone that's colored blue in this photo here. This is the equivalent of our breastbone, but in birds, the breastbone sticks out way in front of them, like the prow of a ship. And the reason birds have this is necessary to anchor the bird's powerful flight muscles. These muscles are really big, really powerful. They need a really big surface for it to anchor one end onto to work. So here's where this starts to get really cool. These are the muscles that move the wings up and down. The pectoralis muscle, this is the same muscle that lowers the arms in humans. And this works basically the same way as ours. So on the lower side of the wing or the arm, there's a muscle that contracts to lower it. But the way birds raise their arms is totally different from how our arms work, and it is basically a pulley system. So birds have a muscle that we do not have called the supracoracoideus, which always makes me think of supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. So this muscle, this is the lighter red one that you can see in this picture here. It attaches to the keel at one end, and from there it loops up and over the shoulder to anchor to the top side of the wing to lift the wing up as it contracts. So it basically works on a pulley system where it's contracting in their chest and that's pulling their wing upward. This makes that upstroke much stronger, and this is part of what makes birds' wings powerful enough for flight. So here I just threw up a graphic showing some of the different types of wings birds have. Birds have many different wing shapes depending on the kind of flying that they do. Do they want to be really acrobatic and, pursue other smaller birds through branches and stuff, or are they soaring over the ocean for long periods of time without moving? Probably the most interesting wings are those of hummingbirds. Hummingbird wings actually, you can't see this normally because when they're flapping their wings, it's just a blur, but they move in this little figure-8 shape. They don't just go up and down. And this actually lets them create lift on the upstroke of the wing as well as the downstroke. I'll be honest that I don't totally understand the physics of this, but somehow moving their wing in a figure-8 lets them generate lift on both parts of the wing stroke, which is part of what makes their hovering possible. So just for fun, if anyone wants to guess either of these, I wondered if anyone knew what the heaviest bird that can fly is, and what bird species has the longest wingspan, as long as we're talking about flying and wings. I'll take this opportunity to take a sip of my water. All right, someone says the heaviest is the swan. Two, condor. I think that means someone thinks that the longest wings are the condor. Pelican, wild turkey. Wild turkeys do look pretty funny when they fly. Bustard, longest is albatross. Okay. So Laura, you were right. The heaviest flying bird is the Cory bustard of Africa. That's it on the left there. Males of this species can weigh up to 40 pounds. So that is not that much smaller than my 7-year-old son. So that is quite a large critter to be taking flight. They don't fly very far. And then the longest wingspan in the world is the wandering albatross. Someone put albatross in there, so you are correct. These birds have a wingspan of up to 11 feet. I have never seen an albatross in person, and I feel like when you see a photo of an albatross, photos don't capture how big they are. If their wingspan is 11 feet from tip to tip, that is fairly astonishing. All right, so next up is song. We're going to talk a little bit about how birds produce their sounds, and this is, of course, the section that I needed to get sound working for. So hopefully we did everything right and everyone will be able to hear it. So here's human vocal anatomy. Here's how I am producing sounds right now. Just to review, we have our larynx or voice box at the back of our throat, just below where the trachea and the esophagus split off from each other. And we produce sound by vibration in our vocal cords, which are folds of tissue within the cartilage structure of the larynx or voice box. This is not how birds do it. This is the theme of this whole talk. As you think birds are like feathered analogs of mammals, birds are completely different from mammals. So birds have a totally different vocal organ, not shared with other vertebrates, called the syrinx. It's not in their throat, it's way down in their chest, right where the trachea forks to go into the two lungs. Other reptiles, non-bird reptiles, some of them have larynxes like we do. As far as scientists can figure out, the syrinx in birds evolved completely independently. This is not something that they evolved from a larynx. This is something that they just came up with on their own over the course of evolution. Birds also do not have vocal cords. The sound is just produced by vibration in the walls of this organ. So birds have very fine control of the syrinx, and because it splits into two sides where the trachea is splitting to go to the two lungs, they can actually control the sides independently, and this means that they can sing two different notes or pitches at the same time. Some birds can even sing an ascending note with one side of the syrinx while simultaneously singing a descending note with the other side. This is what gives some bird songs their otherworldly qualities. So here's the big moment. I'm going to play a sound. Hopefully, you'll be able to hear it. And I want to know if anyone can identify this bird song. Again, you can put it in the Q&A and I'll take a look. Hooray, it's working. All right. Veery, yes. Oh, someone put goldfinches were singing today. Excellent. So, Joan, you got it. That is the Veery. I think I cut it off. I think I cut it short when I went to look at the Q&A. I should have let it play for longer. We don't have veeries where I live. We have a few other thrushes, but not these guys, I don't think. So I miss hearing this. I The Land O'Lakes Bird Alliance made me smile because I lived for 2 years in Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. So different Land O'Lakes, but we were kind of neighbors a long time ago. That's gorgeous. All right. So yes, this is the veery, as someone got correct. Look at that guy. All right, so I have a second one that I'm going to play. This time I know that it'll cut it off if I go to the Q&A, so I'll let it go for a minute. What bird is this? Sure someone's got it by now. Yes, that is the house sparrow, right? So why would I put a house sparrow in here? House sparrows don't have a beautiful song. Well, I'm playing this one. There we go. Because it turns out that even though a house sparrow's song sounds like nondescript chirps to us, there's actually a lot of complexity in there that we can't hear. So birds almost hear a slowed down version of this. When birds hear each other sing, they are able to zero in on tiny variations in amplitude and frequency that might be completely undetectable to us. And those tiny rapid fluctuations in sound waves in these chirps right here might actually encode information on the singer's sex, age, health that can be picked up by other birds. Essentially, other birds hear these sounds as though they were slowed down, and so to other house sparrows, these chirps might actually sound as complex as the veery song on the last slide sounded to us. So next time you hear house sparrows chirping, there's a lot more going on there than you might realize. All right, quiz question. Which bird sex sings? Both. Yes, good job identifying a trick question. Good job, Joan. So I threw this in here because I think a lot of people do identify singing more with male birds, but we've all seen female birds that sing because this is a bird that's very familiar. This is a female northern cardinal. So this is one of the best known female singers in our area. I say our area, I actually don't have cardinals where I live, but I'm pretty sure they have cardinals where you guys are. Now I'm realizing I'm not positive, but I'm sure you guys are at least familiar with these. So this is a female northern cardinal singing. I think they sound like car alarms. They sing beautiful duets with the males. What might be surprising to some of you is that female song has actually been documented in 70% of songbird species. This is the rule, not the exception. Trying to pause it without that thing coming up, but oh well. In most songbirds, the females do sing, at least sometimes in some circumstances. Female song is actually more prevalent in birds that live in the tropics, which might explain why it's been kind of overlooked since the birds of Europe and North America have historically been much more thoroughly studied than tropical birds. Female birds sing for similar reasons to males, including to defend territories and communicate with mates. And in fact, the most recent research on this suggests that females probably sang in the common ancestor of all modern songbird species, which means the real question might be why female birds don't sing in some species today. All right, don't know why that was in there twice. Okay, does anyone know the loudest bird in the world? Pull up my Q&A again. Both, mostly males, both. Bellabird. Joan, you are on fire this evening. All right. So yes, the loudest bird in the world is the white bellbird. This is a bird that lives in northeastern South America. Its vocalizations have been measured at 125 decibels, which is as loud as a jackhammer. And of course, I wouldn't tease this without letting you hear what it sounds like. So here we go. Oh, someone has a hand raised. If you have a question, you can stick it in the Q&A and I will take a look at that. I'm keeping you all in suspense about this bellbird. All right, let me go ahead and play it and then I'll take another look. All right, this is what the bellbird sounds like. They also have that fantastic waddle hanging off of their faces. So those guys are super weird. This basically the reason that they do this is it's just a really extreme approach to attracting and impressing females in the really dense Amazon rainforest where sound might not carry all that well. All right, let's take one more look here real quick. All right. Sorry to the person who had a question. I don't see it in here, but maybe we can tackle questions at the end too. All right. So finally, talking about how birds hear each other's songs in the dense forest provides us with a little bit of a nice seg into talking about bird senses. So birds have the same five basic senses as us, plus an extra one that we'll get to in a couple minutes. And so I wanted to start with bird vision. So I'm sure we recognize this. This is a starling. We've all seen these guys. What is unusual about this, the image of this bird, I'll just tell you rather than making you put it in the Q&A. This is a photo showing how a starling's plumage fluoresces under ultraviolet light. So birds are tetrachromats. What that means is we have in our eyes, I'm sure you are familiar with rods and you remember learning about rods and cones. So cones are our color sensing light receptors. We have three different types. So we pick up color at three different wavelengths of light. And those colors, combined make up all the colors that we can perceive. Birds have a fourth type of color sensor. So this makes their color vision much more sophisticated and detailed than ours. And in at least some bird species, that fourth cone is actually sensitive to UV light, ultraviolet light. So at least some birds can actually see ultraviolet, which is invisible to us. This is an image of a budgie, a budgerigar specimen under UV light, showing the spots on its plumage that light up. So we can't know exactly what birds with UV sensitive eyes are seeing, but of course it's a safe bet that they can see patterns and markings on things around them that are invisible to us. And in some species where the males and females look exactly the same to us, they actually have different markings under UV. And it may also help with finding food, like identifying red berries among green leaves and things like that. Couple more unique aspects of bird vision. Raptors, like eagles, can spot prey several kilometers away. They have a whole bunch of adaptations for being able to hunt visually. They have binocular vision, meaning their eyes, like ours, they point forward instead of to the sides so they can perceive depth. They have huge eyes and they have a really high concentration of photoreceptors. So diurnal raptors like eagles, they have twice as many of those cones as we do. I threw an albatross on here again because albatrosses and gulls and terns have a different kind of weird eye thing. They have red oil droplets in their cone receptors, which enhance distance vision in hazy conditions. Another weird thing with bird eyes, some birds have two fovea. So the fovea is the area of the retina where your visual acuity is the highest. Basically, whenever you're looking right at something, you're pointing your fovea at it, and then you've got your blurrier vision around the sides. So, and when you want to look at something, you're moving your head or your eyes to point your fovea at it. Now imagine having two different in focus areas in your vision, one straight ahead and another one off to the side. That's how some birds' eyes work. And then, so something new that I did not know about when I made this PowerPoint, some research that actually just came out in the last month or so. So bird retinas, which is the part at the back of the eye where the light is gathered and turned into signals for the brain. Birds are the only vertebrates that do not have any blood vessels in their retinas, which was a mystery for a really long time because doing the work of a retina takes a lot of fuel, a lot of oxygen, and so no one knew quite how birds were managing this, and they didn't know if there was a different mechanism for getting oxygen in there besides having blood vessels running all through the retina. Now they figured out that birds have just, this gets sort of complicated, but birds have bypassed oxygen in the retina completely, and there's a different eye structure that's just like bathing the retina of birds in sugar all the time to keep it functioning. It's really weird. And what I thought was really cool about this is we don't realize it because they're just always there, but having all those tiny capillaries, those tiny blood vessels in our retinas does actually affect our vision and makes it a little blurrier than it could be otherwise. So apparently just completely getting rid of blood vessels in your eyes is a way to make your vision even sharper. And so birds are the only group of vertebrates that has no capillaries in their retinas, which is very strange. Okay. So that was vision. We're going to talk about smell a little bit. And this is probably obviously a trick question, but true or false, most birds have a poor sense of smell. This is something that I hear all the time. I know very well-regarded naturalists who still go around telling people that most birds cannot smell. False. Yes, this is false. Pretty much all birds can smell. So if anyone tells you birds do not have a good sense of smell, this is completely not true. This is a long, persistent myth, and it drives me a bit nuts. So it's true that scientists used to believe that most birds had a very poor sense of smell. They do tend to have really small olfactory bulbs, which is the brain structure that processes smells compared to mammals. And so scientists made the mistaken assumption that small olfactory bulbs in the brain must equal bad sense of smell. If you have heard this myth, you might have heard that vultures are an exception to this and that they find carcasses by smell. Actually, whether vultures do locate carcasses by smell or by sight has been a subject of controversy in the history of ornithology going all the way back to John James Audubon. So Audubon in the 1820s did a bunch of experiments where he put a rotting hog carcass out hidden under some grass, and he found that vultures never found the rotting hog carcass under grass and came to feed on it, but they did quickly show up when he put out a freshly killed rabbit in plain sight. So Audubon assumed that vultures were not finding carcasses by smell, but they could just see them. Then in the 1960s, an ornithologist named Ken Steger finally debunked this idea that vultures only find carcasses by sight. He figured out that the reason that vultures didn't go for Audubon's rotting hog carcass was because they don't actually like animals that have been dead for more than a few days. So that hog carcass that Audubon was hiding was just too ripe. And the way folks finally figured out what was going on was that oil company employees had been noticing for a long time that vultures seemed to be attracted to leaks in natural gas pipelines. This was actually part of how they would find leaks in pipelines, as if they saw a bunch of vultures hanging around. They knew they needed to go check it out. And it turns out that the substance they add to natural gas to give it its rotten egg smell is the same one that creates the smell of dead carcasses. And so this is what vultures are keying in on. So, experiments in the 1990s added certain seabirds, including petrels and albatrosses, which keep coming up again and again, to this list of birds for which smell is important. This time, this goes back to a biologist named Gabrielle Nevitt, who noticed that these seabirds showed up really, really quickly when she tried spreading crushed krill on the ocean's surface. These specific seabirds showed up quickly while other species did not. And she wondered how they were quickly locating food in the big wide ocean. And eventually she figured out that they were honing in on a chemical called dimethyl sulfide, which has a really strong odor and is released when zooplankton like krill digest phytoplankton. And so this lets these wide-ranging seabirds locate food-rich locations over really long distances. But at this point, we know that really pretty much all birds have a pretty good sense of smell and use it for all sorts of things. So there's an ornithologist named Danielle Whitaker who studies juncos, who wrote a really fun book called The Secret Perfume of Birds about her work with juncos and their sense of smell. Her research is focused on oil produced in a gland at the base of birds' tails, which they use for preening and feather maintenance. If you've ever watched birds preening their feathers, you might kind of see them periodically turn around and kind of stick their beak into the base of their tail and wiggle it around. They're getting oil from this gland called the uripigio gland that they spread on their feathers to keep them nice. And so Dr. Whitaker found that in juncos, the odors in this oil vary between sexes and between seasons and between birds with different levels of aggression, and that birds can detect these odors from each other and seem to get information about each other from them. So basically, the sense of smell is probably a lot more important for a really wide range of bird species than we've realized. And anyone who tells you that most birds can't smell is relying on really out-of-date information. So if you ever hear that one again, you can set people straight. All right. What is one sense birds have that we lack? Check my Q&A. Oh, there's a bunch more stuff in there. False, 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 but it depends. False, false, false. Oh, someone said if birds had contact solution, would it be sugar water because of the retina running on sugar? That's really funny. All right, Joan said, okay, Joan says magnetic. Howard Marcus says vibration, magnetism, magnetism. Yes. All right. So I don't know about vibration, but the one that I was thinking of here is magnetism. So birds can sense the Earth's magnetic field. And so this is not a really long talk. I hope that's okay. This is the last little section here. We're going to talk about birds' ability to sense magnetic fields, how we figured out that they can do this, and what we think about how they're managing it. So, yes, birds can sense the magnetic fields of the Earth, and they use this as one of their tools for navigation when they're migrating long distances. Ornithologists demonstrated this in the 1960s and 70s using European robins. They took them into laboratories and they artificially manipulated the magnetic fields around captive birds using big laboratory apparatuses and saw that it affected how they oriented themselves when they thought they were getting ready to fly. Birds are not the only animals that do this. Other animals that are believed to use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate include insects, salmon, sea turtles, whales. But even though we know for absolute certain that birds do this, and actually, a side note, now there's research showing that when we have really intense geomagnetic activity, like big auroras and stuff, the number of birds turning up in weird places increases because when the Earth's magnetic field is disrupted, the birds get lost. So we 100% know that this is happening. For a long time, we had no idea how it was happening, and we're still not completely sure. So the leading theory for a long time was this one. Tiny clusters of magnetite crystals, which is a magnetic mineral, have been found in the upper beaks of homing pigeons. And so for a long time, the leading theory was that these functioned as tiny sensors that birds could use to feel the Earth's magnetic field via some sort of tugging sensation in their beaks. Now, actually, the leading theory involves quantum physics. And so this is a figure from a scientific paper about this theory. I'm going to try to explain this. It's really weird. Like I said, it's quantum physics. So bear with me. We'll see if I can explain this in a way that's intelligible. So birds' eyes contain special blue light sensitive proteins called cryptochromes. And when a blue light photon hits a cryptochrome protein in a bird's eye, I'm reading from my notes here, this generates a special set of quantum particles called a random pair. And it's this quantum random pair that is super sensitive to even faint variations in the surrounding magnetic field. And the orientation of the Earth's magnetic field affects the likelihood that this cryptochrome protein is going to end up in one of several different possible states as a result. And so the signaling state of the protein determines what sort of signal is sent to the bird's brain, and the bird can combine this with other sensory input as it plots its course. Basically, the short version of this is we now think that this is happening in birds' eyes, which we don't know, but it might mean that birds literally see the Earth's magnetic field as like a blue glow that they can follow. We don't really know, but it's really weird to picture. All right, so this is kind of a short talk. I hope that is okay. We are coming to the end of the talk. To recap, we've talked about how birds breathe, how birds fly, how they sing, how they sense the world. And I really hope that everyone in the audience, even if you already knew some of what I was just talking about, that you learned at least one cool new bird fact that you did not know before. So thank you again for having me. Real quick plug again, this is my book Flight Paths, which is not about the stuff that I was just talking about. It's about the surprisingly weird and entertaining history of bird migration research. So there's some really crazy stories in this book, and I would encourage you to check it out. I Excuse me. I also put up here my website, RebeccaHeisman.com. Everyone always asks me if I'm working on a second book. The answer is no, but I do lots of other freelance writing about birds. I actually just had a piece that was published today about northern gannet colonies in the UK after avian influenza. And so if you're interested in that, if you go to my website, I have a little free monthly email newsletter you can sign up for where I share weird bird facts and stories like these and things that I've been writing and book recommendations and stuff. So I know we have some time left. I would be more than happy to take questions, although I don't have a completely exhaustive knowledge of all aspects of bird biology, but I will. Izzy, should I just take a look and see what people are putting in the Q&A?
Yeah, and I can also read some too if that's helpful.
Yes, sure.
Okay, so and yeah, just go ahead and put questions in Q&A if you have any. Our
Oh,
first
someone
one,
said think about when the north-south fields reverse. Yeah, of course, over the history of the Earth, every now and then the magnetic field completely reverses, and that I guess happens far enough apart that, birds can kind of evolve to deal with it. But yes, that's going to really confuse all the birds when that happens.
yeah, and we have a question here about the ultraviolet light. Birds in ultraviolet light, how is this determined? What percentage of birds can see it? And how do we know that other birds can't, or haven't they been tested yet?
So that is a really great question. And now that I am thinking about it, I don't actually know off the top of my head how scientists go about figuring this out. Like there obviously must be some sort of test you can do to figure out what wavelengths birds' eyes are sensitive to. But I do know that the answer is that it just hasn't been tested in all species yet. And so we know that some bird species are sensitive to UV, some are not, and then there's a lot more birds where we just haven't tested this yet. So, like I said, I knew that probably some of the questions were going to get into things that I didn't know the answer to. So I'm sorry about that.
There's endless things to know and
I
ask about birds.
know.
So,
Oh, and here's someone who says, do the hollow birds that extra lungs apply to birds that don't fly like penguins? I don't know about the hollow bones. I'm pretty sure though that all birds have the air sac. So I think even penguins have the weird one direction air sac loop system because that's how all birds' lungs work. And someone said, will the slides be made available later? I'd be happy to send my PowerPoint if someone wanted to pass it
yeah.
along. I mean, I could do that.
Yeah, we certainly can. And also this, is being recorded and we'll upload that as
Okay.
well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, John McKiernan says magnetic north moves slowly over the course of decades, so they must have time to adapt to that. Okay, I didn't actually know that. I'd always pictured it happening as some sudden shocking event. By the way, Joan, you get the gold star for getting all the trivia questions right this evening. Oh, penguin bones are less hollow. Yeah, that's what I thought I remembered hearing that somewhere. The penguin bones are denser because, of course, they're trying to move through the water, but they still have the air sac system, which I feel like I still remember learning about the air sacs in my undergraduate ornithology class, and my mind was just blown that like their lungs just have a completely different setup than ours do. It just seems very strange.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we assume these things, right? We assume that
Right?
they're
Yeah.
like just like us. And I remember maybe a year or two ago, I did some bird banding and realized that songbirds have see-through skin. And that
Mm,
just like
yeah.
absolutely blew my mind.
That's right, because you can see how much fat they have under their skin.
Yeah, you like
Yeah,
blow
that's
on their
part of that.
feathers. Okay, what else
Oh,
do
someone put in it's believed that some dinosaurs probably had the hollow spaces in their bones as well. That's some non-bird dinosaurs. Yeah, Valerie put, we often hear that birds' bones are hollow to keep them light, but that's open to question now. Yeah, I had always heard that as well. And then when I was first making this presentation, I tried to find like a really, authoritative scientific source saying this, that someone has tested this and found that the air pockets in birds' bones are to keep them light. And apparently that's not, we don't know for sure if that's what they're for. They might even have to do with breathing because they're connected to the respiratory air sacs. So it's unclear. Couldn't they be both for lightweight and for air sacs? Yes, absolutely. Do we know which birds use UV light for mating purposes and which ones use it to hunt? I don't know. I want like birds looking for fish underwater. That could be a good use of UV vision. I don't know. That's a great question. I think raptors use it for hunting. Okay, yeah. Yeah, the thing about birds not having any capillaries in their retinas was a new thing that I just learned a month ago that blew my mind that they're to make their vision more acute, they've just evolved to not have any blood vessels messing that up. Do bird eye colors make a difference in vision? I don't think so. There was like a review paper that came out last year about different bird eye colors, and I don't remember much from it. I don't think they have to do with vision. I think they more have to do with like signaling to other birds, by having cool looking eyes.
Yeah, the sense of smell thing was completely new to me. It made me think a lot about how you can get like spicy bird seed for to dis
Oh
deter
yeah.
squirrels. And it makes me
Yeah.
wonder if like how the birds experience that too, and if that's any bit of a deterrent to some different bird species. I don't know.
Well, and being sensitive to capsaicin is a whole separate thing. And I think there was
Yeah.
just some research that came out recently showing that at least some parrots are sensitive to capsaicin, but that's another thing where it might vary between different groups of birds. And that's kind of a separate question than having a sense of smell. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Where do you think we should start research when it comes to tropical birds? I don't know. That's a huge question. I mean, there are a lot of people studying birds in the tropics now. It was more of sort of a historical thing where most people trained in, Western science were folks living in North America and Europe, and so they were studying the birds close at hand, and it led to some bias and assuming that what's normal for birds in North America and Europe is normal for all birds, which is really not the case, well, not the case. And then Joan says, what about bird taste? Birds do have a sense of taste. Like hummingbirds can definitely taste sweetness, so that's what motivates them to go looking for sugary nectar. It probably varies between groups of birds depending on what they eat, because your sense of taste determines what you're going to be motivated to try out there and find and put in your mouth. Do researchers agree that birds can think more quickly than humans can? Jennifer Ackerman has said human brains are like lasagna and impulses are longer to travel, take longer to travel, whereas birds are like a garlic head, so impulses can zip around quickly. I don't know details about that. That sounds plausible though, because I've definitely heard the thing, like I said, about how house sparrows, how birds almost hear a slowed down version of sounds compared to us and can pick out a lot more detail. So that makes sense to me. Joan asked, do birds have the five different taste receptors? I don't think so, or at least not all birds. I don't know a lot of detail about birds' sense of taste. I'll have to dig into that more. Oh, and here's someone asking about the same thing, the spicy things in bird feeders to deter squirrels. I I don't really know. I think probably most birds are not sensitive to capsaicin, but which is the thing that makes the spicy taste. But I think there might have been some research recently showing that at least some parrots can taste it, but I don't know. That's a really good question. Not all animals are sensitive to spicy things.
I know that researchers have their ways, but it seems so crazy that people can research how quickly birds think compared to humans.
I
I have
know.
no
There's
idea
so
how
much
that's
weird
measurable.
stuff out there.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that my answers to so many of these questions are like, gosh, I don't know. Like I have no depth of knowledge in any of these topics. This is me having like a very shallow level of knowledge about a very wide swath of bird biology.
No, that's great. What's the question that you looked up one day that got you more interested into like exploring the niche parts of birds? Like what made you look up
Oh
bird
gosh.
lungs?
Um, I don't know. It probably goes back to like I took a really good ornithology class as an undergraduate in college, so that got into a lot of this like biology and anatomy stuff that you might not hear about otherwise, and that's probably
Yeah.
what made me start thinking about a lot of these really weird things. And then I mentioned Danielle Whitaker's book, which is on my shelf over here, The Secret Perfume of Birds. So if you really want to dig into the bird sense of smell thing, that's a really good one to look up. It's kind of part memoir about her career in science and, getting dismissed as someone who studied bird sense of smell with senior scientists telling her, well, birds can't smell, so that's a silly thing to study, and then going out and proving them wrong.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Where did I go to school? So I am originally from Ohio, so I went to a little liberal arts college in Ohio called Ohio Wesleyan University, where we had a really great ornithologist named Jed Burt who studied bacteria that live in bird feathers. And so he taught my undergraduate ornithology class, which was a lot of fun.
I think one of the biggest things I learned here today is that there are no cardinals in Washington. That's crazy.
As I was speaking, I realized that maybe I shouldn't assume that there are cardinals in
Oh,
the Twin
there's
Cities, but there
tons of
are.
them.
You have
Yeah,
cardinals. Okay, there are no
yeah.
cardinals here.
That's so interesting.
We get blue jays once in a blue moon, and everyone gets very excited about them.
I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that we could do without the Blue Jays some of the time. They can be a little rude.
Yep, every about once every other winter, we'll get a couple blue jays that wander all the way out here. Steve says, "What are some of your favorite sources for new bird info?" Honestly, I read a lot of scientific papers for my work as a freelance science writer, so I'm always looking for interesting new research to pitch stories about. So I'm actually trolling the actual journals for new papers, and so that's how you learn about weird stuff like bird retinas and things. So I don't know that that would work for everyone. So I'm not saying everyone interested in new bird information should go out and subscribe to a bunch of scientific journals, but there's a lot of really good magazines out there. Like I contribute quite a bit to Living Bird, which is the magazine of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they cover all sorts of new bird research, not just research being done at Cornell. So that might be a good one to look up if you're interested in like bird science.
Do we have any more questions for Rebecca here before we go? Let's see. All right, well, I think that's all we have for now. We'll post the webinar as well, so um, everybody can look back on it too if they have lingering questions. But thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you for putting up with my just, 40 minutes of random bird facts.
Oh, it was so interesting. Bird lungs, so crazy.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yep.